This is TWiT. What about this one? I have a Hello doorbell. That's the Google Nest Hello doorbell.
This is trouble.
Is this the CNET story?
Yes.
Yes.
I also had an Amazon Ring doorbell, which I maybe foolishly replaced with the Google Hello doorbell because we'd heard so much about how Ring was handing over stuff to local police.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now it turns out Google does the same thing without consent.
Yes.
And without warrants. Right, Chris?
Well, okay,
for
so
CNET.
So this is an important story. And Rye did a great job here. So he talked to a bunch of camera makers. And the two big ones, Google and Ring, when police have what they call emergency orders or emergency requests.
And those are intended to be like somebody's dying, right?
Right. Like there's a shooting happening right now, or there was a kidnapping or something big. When the police make a request, an emergency request, they don't need a warrant, they don't need a subpoena, and they don't need to tell the user. They just pull the video.
Because no company wants the headline. There was video of this guy being murdered. What was the famous story, Jeff, in New York City where the poor woman was being...
Well, it turned out it was absolutely wrong.
It is false.
Yeah.
It's a false story.
Yeah. Well, then never mind. I won't
Genovese.
Okay. But nobody wants
Kitty Genovese.
Kitty Genovese. Nobody wants that headline.
It was a moral panic of its time that people thought that she was being murdered and nobody stepped in, and that turns out not to be true.
Typical urban legend. But nevertheless,
no one wants to see a 4-year-old get murdered on their Ring camera and find out that the police could have stopped it.
By the way, Google, and thanks to the chat room for putting this up, at 1:45 today released a statement that they shared with 9 to 5 Google. Quote, Google has clarified the company has never exercised its ability to share footage with law enforcement to date. So they haven't done it to date, but feels that it is, quote, important to reserve the right to do so.
But in those kinds of cases, do they limit it to that?
Yeah, in those kinds of cases. So Ring did it 11 times, and they told 11 times last year. They told Senator Markey this in response to a letter that he sent to them. Some things to note about this that I think are really important. Emergency requests are the same thing that hackers abuse to get access to people's private Facebook accounts. They spoofed a police officer's credentials, basically a police station's credentials, and said, hey, we want an emergency request for these accounts. They got access to private photos and then did a extortion kind of thing. So these are not fail-proof or fail-safe or whatever the word I'm thinking of is.
Foolproof?
But foolproof? Nothing is. So that's one. These don't happen often. What's really upsetting is Ring says that they didn't notify the people. So they pulled this data, they shared it with the police, but they didn't tell the camera owner that they did this. Actually, what they said is when asked if they shared this information with the owner, they didn't respond. So that's not great.
Wait a minute. They shared it with the owner, but the owner ignored them.
Sorry, they shared it with the police. And they didn't tell the owner.
That is wrong.
That's wrong.
Right.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on your point of view.
There's no reason that you couldn't save somebody in an emergency and tell the people who own the camera that they used their camera. Those could go hand in hand without any risk.
They probably should.
Yeah, probably should. Yeah.
And then the other thing to note is Arlo got back to them and they were like, yeah, we don't do that ever.
Nor does Anchor, nor does Eufy, right?
Eufy is Anchor.
That has problems too.
Wise doesn't do it, right?
Wise doesn't do it. So that does have problems. I mean, I guess we could see a 4-year-old getting murdered on their front porch with a Wise cam or a Wise doorbell, which would be terrible. But the other thing, where was I going to go with this? Oh, if you have a Ring doorbell and you do two-way encryption, they can't pull that video. So you could actually stop this by turning on two-way encryption. What's interesting is if you do that with Ring, Ring is very careful to tell you, hey, then you can't send your Ring data to your Ring video camera data to other devices in your home, and certain other features won't work. So most people decide not to do it. Apple.
Is there an associated fee with that encryption?
No, it's free.
Good question, Ant. They'll do that someday soon.
Can I...
Wait, I want to say one thing. Apple lets you, because it's apples to apples or apples to Ring. Apple does encrypted end-to-end video as part of their HomeKit secure video, and they have figured out a way.
Ironically, they don't sell a camera.
Right. But they do work with Logitech and I think Eufy for their stuff.
Oh, okay.
And you can see that on Apple devices within their ecosystem. So they have figured out how to do end-to-end encryption without breaking the features that Ring cannot do. And that could just
What should the policy be, Stacey? What would your prescription be?
If you use emergency, if you answer emergency requests, you should put out a report as a tech company noting when that happens.
A transparency report. I agree.
Yeah, a transparency report.
Yeah.
I do think you should tell the users.
Yeah.
I can see if the person is a suspect during the emergency.
Good
maybe
point.
You wouldn't want to tell them afterwards.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's some things that we'd have to figure out how that should look. And I think you probably should turn on end-to-end encryption and make it easier. I know that means people can't get it, but if you want surveillance video, then have your municipality go through the public process to get those up.
So we're not saying it's a bad thing for police to say it's an emergency, a child's being abducted. We need that video now, Ring, and for Ring to provide it. We're not saying that's a bad thing, are we? Because I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a good
thing. I don't. I think it creates a network of privately owned but publicly accessible surveillance that could be a problem.
That's an interesting point.
Interesting, Stacey. Yeah, so it's different from the city having a camera in London on damn near every corner. It's the city's camera.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not real fond of that either.
Well, we're not. But so there's actually a really interesting case right now in New Orleans. They had stopped using facial recognition, but like 2 or 3 years ago. But now, because of like an uptick in crime during the pandemic, they voted recently to allow facial recognition on their public cameras. But they did that sort of publicly. The same thing that's happening in San Francisco. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I think. They're looking to use, actually, San Francisco, they're looking to use private cameras for that. But anyway, the point is, if you want this sort of surveillance, you should have to get that surveillance in a public forum. That's the bottom line for me.
And I don't think people would be so concerned if they trusted police or government. I think the real issue, and it's hard to take me seriously when I'm wearing a lamp.
Yes, it is. Yes.
But my head was cold. The real issue is that we don't trust government or police to do the right thing with this information. Right?
Right.
That's the fundamental issue.
I don't think you could trust anyone to do the right thing. I mean, this is absolute power, which we all know corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. You don't want a surveillance state. So that's part of the problem. But also, and this goes back to Elie Mystel, who really says if you want to solve the problems with police in this country, you simply enforce the Fourth Amendment, the right against unreasonable search and seizure. This is covered by the Fourth Amendment. You have a right to privacy, and people are afraid of what an untamed police force, which in many jurisdictions is the case, will do with the access to this kind of video. All kinds of things, right?
I think this conversation is getting a big boost from things like the Dobbs decision, because now all of a sudden we're recognizing.
Yeah, what if you're across the street from an abortion clinic, right?
Right. Exactly. So is it an emergency if someone's thinking about having an abortion? Maybe. If you're in Texas, then you're arguing that someone's life is on the line.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Some unborn fetus's life is on the line. That's exactly right.
I should at least know that it got used once so I can tear it out and put in an electric button.
What's he talking about?
He's saying
if it has been used,
or just use the Arlo.
Yeah, but again, none of this would be an issue if we trusted police. And because we don't, many people, rightly so, don't, I think, especially if you're a person of color, don't trust police. It doesn't matter what transparency reports or what Google says or what Wise says. This stuff is you're taking these videos. It's out there. And so maybe it's a shame that property owners need to encrypt to prevent, unlawful use of this stuff, but maybe we do.
Well, then the next clip, I'll throw this out there because there's tons of TikTok videos of people like showing off people at their doors. Like, we saw this video. And it's fine if it's the homeowner.
Right. Or go into neighborhood.
FedEx guy.
Go into neighborhood, that app, right?
Oof. Yeah.
There's a black man walking up and down the street. Here's the video. Now,
well, it's not even just like a black person. It's like people like.
It often is, though, in Petaluma. It's like, there's some black guy walking around. I don't know if I trust him. That's it. He's taking pictures. Knock it off.
Hence why I always wear
He's after your espresso machine.
It's a shame, but Ann has to wear orange. It's a shame.
Because I do not want to look suspicious.
Yeah.
I want you to see me out there.
It makes me cry. Yeah. It's terrible. Wow. It's terrible. And so this is all part of that. And yeah.
Well.
So that's why it's an issue. That's why it's an issue.
It's one of these cases where this is Stacey's line. Something we need to talk about.
Yes.
Because there is a different level here where we'll figure out the norms we expect. We'll figure out what's right and wrong. But we need, it's like Scoble going into the men's room at I.O. with his Google Glass on and people freaking out.
I should say nextdoor.com, not neighbors. Nextdoor.com. Yeah. Phoenix Warren, who is in our chat room and is a person of color, says, if I know that my video could prevent my fellow humans from being hurt, preventing a kidnapping or murder or anything, I'd be more than happy to help. I'd say that much. I agree. We're not saying that.
Yeah.
We're not saying that. No. We're worried more about misuse.
Yeah. And, they have, not in an emergency situation, they can totally use that they can ask you for your data. The police will come to you and be like, there's a form they get to fill out, and Ring talks to you, and you can share, you basically say, yeah, you can have my data to solve this crime. Like, there's a bunch of car thieves. A car was stolen in front of your camera. Can we have access to the footage?
Hey, if I had a video of that, I would share that. Absolutely.
Well, here's the other case, though. If you're a journalist, the norm has been you share with police what you've already shared with the public and no more. Mm-hmm. But there's an argument to say that that's wrong. Look at what's happening on January 6th. If those filmmakers who had followed the Proud Boys and followed the Trumps had said, no, we're journalists, well, you watch our film, that's it, we wouldn't have things that we have. So it's what's your right to withhold in a case of public interest? That's a question. We should debate that.
That is interesting.